Hi there and welcome back to the We Are Change talk show. I want to thank you for joining me. Our condolences go out to anyone that is suffering after the attack in Christchurch. A lot of the details are still very vague as to the victims, but we want to express our deepest sympathies here at We Are Change. We have another great guest on the show for you today, Eliahi Priest. He has been on a mission for freedom and put forward a great deal of effort in his humanitarian campaign. Let's cross to that now. Welcome to the show, Eliahi. You've been on an emotionally charged journey. Please tell the viewers how this all started and what you've been through.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and certainly appreciate the platform that you've created. And Crowdsource the Truth is,
thank you,
a really good platform, and happy to be here. It has been a bit of a roller coaster, to be perfectly honest. I think anyone who's involved in trying to get to the bottom of how humanity has arrived at this intersection, which is clearly a pretty dire one from any perspective, has seen that there's incredible backlash and roadblocks and pressure and opposition when you try and ask just the sensible questions. And particularly in Australia, when I picked up the baton again, so to speak, because I was doing this work over in the United Kingdom to do with investigating CIA drug trafficking, I stopped doing that for family reasons. I was working closely with Lord David James of Blackheath, and I moved back to Australia, and then just retired from that line of work and worked in hospitality up here on the coast, on the Sunshine Coast, and a bit of landscaping, and then I was involved in IT for a bit, and then working back in my family's jewellery business. I didn't have anything to do with my former life, as it were, in the UK.
Yes.
Exploring this stuff. And just a little bit of background for your viewers, I got involved in exploring this stuff because I became familiar with what's termed the collateral accounts, or these off-balance accounts, which are bank balances that exist in banks around the world, which aren't actually reported on, that they're in security-cleared compartments that intelligence agencies and budgets of intelligence agencies work with these banking compartments. I believe that the Royal Bank of Scotland calls them Chinese walls, and you need border crossing permissions to get certain information in these Chinese boxes. And that really intrigued me, particularly when Lord David James came out in the House of Lords and reported $15 trillion swifted from the Federal Reserve Bank to JP Morgan to RBS Global in 2009 at the height of the global financial crisis, when RBS was crying poor and getting billions of pounds off the UK taxpayer to prop up the bank. And meanwhile, it's sitting on this unaccounted, unreported, security-cleared $15 trillion. To me, that spoke of something really significant that I wanted to investigate and explore. Yes. And that is what put me on this pretty tumultuous journey through Australia, dealing with the complete ineptitude, I have to call it, of Australia's law enforcement and security agencies, and I've got ample proof of that. And complicity of Australia's law enforcement and security agencies with the crime, with the criminals, because the criminals, being the CIA, or I won't say the whole agency, I'll say certain factions in that agency, are more obviously influential and powerful than I am as an ordinary bloke from Gunnedah with enough information to bring the whole party under.
So you're in the UK, you're doing investigative work, you're connected with some high-profile figures, you start to uncover corruption, offshore bank accounts. It all comes to light through CIA drug trafficking. The public has been aware of this for quite some time, maybe not to the extent of what you've uncovered. This is an emerging problem within Australian banks as well, isn't it?
Well, most certainly. Excuse me. I'd like to take the viewers back to the Nugan Hand Bank, which was a Sydney merchant bank It was actually set up by a US agent, Frank Nugan, who came from Vietnam and then based himself in Sydney and worked with Michael Hand, an Australian, and they set up this bank that came out of nowhere, and there are allegations of drug trafficking, CIA involvement, and arms dealing. And in the subsequent Royal Commission, after Frank Nugan was found dead, and this is the key here in terms of Nugan Hand, Frank Nugan was found dead.
Take it back to that spot there for me, please.
No worries. So Frank Nugan was found dead on a dirt track with CIA Director William Colby's business card in his top pocket. There were footprints around his body that were there before the police were able to investigate the crime scene. And obviously having a former CIA director's business card in your pocket at the time of your death is a significant revelation, to say the least. Now, the FBI document that I was given, which I've had verified by friends in Washington, it is a genuine article. It talks of 5 men that set up the CIA drug trafficking operation. And the Nugan Hand Bank was investigated thoroughly after that point. In fact, Frank Nugan's body was exhumed so they could do a further autopsy. And, you know, that's very significant. When I was talking about this FBI document, the 5 names specified in setting up the CIA cocaine trafficking operation, and it wasn't just cocaine, of course, it was heroin as well from Vietnam, were George Bush Sr., who just passed away last November, William Colby, whose business card was found in Frank Nugan's jacket pocket on his dead body.
Was it Bill Clinton?
Sorry, what's that?
Bill Clinton as well. Was he linked in?
Bill Clinton wasn't in the document because he was still an up-and-comer at that point, but the way the Clintons were linked into the Bushes, and this is really how we start to see a deep state agenda as opposed to you know, the Democrats fighting the Republicans. Of course, the Bush family Republicans, the Clintons are Democrats, and they seem to be opposition, but really they're part of the same criminal network, which effectively it is. Now, there were allegations that came out through Gary Webb, who was the incredible journalist for the Mercury Times, and there's a movie about him, Shoot the Messenger. It's quite a good movie. I think it's got Ray Liotta starring as Gary.
He's brilliant.
And I'm, yeah, absolutely. And I'm friends with Gary's son as well. I'd like to, you know, work with him moving forward. But again, he's hands-off journalism for obvious reasons. And it was people like Gary Webb that brought this to light in the US, and then a lot of information came forward and there were subsequent inquiries. But of course, the Clinton and Bush cartel were strong enough to be able to shut that inquiry down. Now, at the time that they were flying drugs in from Nicaragua, cocaine that is, they were landing in Mena, Arkansas. And at that time, Clinton was the governor of Arkansas and he was permitting that. And that's how the Clintons and the Bushes began to grow so powerful in those early years, because they made an absolute fortune with that amount of money and began to control all aspects of US intelligence. And as we can see, Clinton, Hillary's influence on the FBI more recently in her election campaign, and the pressure that was put back on Trump as a result. And it's criminal cartels operating our governments. And I've seen clear evidence of that in Australia, that not one politician, not one law enforcement agency, not one accountable person in government has been able to answer a single straight question that I've put to them, despite the fact that when I send an email, they check my emails, you know, a dozen, 2 dozen, 100 times, because I use a little cookie tracker. So when I send an email, I can measure the response like a marketing company would.
Very smart. You've brought some incriminating evidence to light, and it's just all been ignored. Now, this money laundering, drug trafficking, this has been going on for many years. They go to any extreme to cover it up. You mentioned Mena Airport. There was even 2 teenagers, I believe, were murdered to try and cover that up. So You know, how long will they be able to hide these dealings? Well, we need more people like yourself coming forward. Now, through Australian banks, you've even brought to light this is happening as well. They're funneling drug money and laundering it through a mediary, such as any Australian banking institution.
Well, I don't have direct evidence of the big five banks, as we call them at this point. What I have seen is that AUSTRAC, which basically is a government agency that manages oversight of the transfer of funds in and out of Australia. I think it's any amount over 10,000. It might be less now. AUSTRAC were unanswerable to the 15 trillion and Nugan Hand and the evidence that I have. The concern came that when you start to actually look at the corruption, I actually found that banks were used, for instance, in the Philippines when AusAid, which was a department under the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, actually financed the Mort brothers in the Philippines. I'm not sure why that deal was struck, but those Mort brothers went on to commit acts of terrorism in the Philippines with money they were given. Now, my question is this. Under the Criminal Code Act of 1995, it is illegal to fund terrorism, period. Period. Why then has there not been any serious questions by the AFP, by ASIO and by ASIS? At the end of the day, they're taxpayer dollars. Taxpayer dollars. They're not, it's not the government's money, it's your money. It's yours and my money. And these people are spending it on terrorism. Now, the viewers at home will know when we go through airports, we get almost molested sometimes because we could be terrorists.
Absolutely.
Everyone's a terrorist in the eyes of the Australian government. They're talking about facial recognition, which has come into effect. They're talking about being able to turn on smart appliances in the home whenever there's a terrorist event. They're talking about sweeping censorship laws to the internet. And they've been doing this and ramping up this fear-based campaign that everyone's a terrorist for a number of years. And yet when the Australian government finances terrorism, clear reporting on it, clear facts, AusAid shut down, the Australian government is unaccountable. There's not even an Australian government press release on it.
That's right.
What sort of Stasi, totalitarian government are we voting for, ladies and gentlemen?
It's completely tyrannical.
Finance terrorism, exactly.
That's right. They've taken over the criminal elite, or the establishment. They're operating behind the scenes, funding terrorism, and all at the same time using mainstream media to perpetrate that the public are the ones that are the potential terrorists, when they should be the ones investigated. And you've brought some damning evidence to light, and they just refuse to admit it. That there's no admission whatsoever. We need justice, and we need it fast.
Exactly, and this is part of the problem, is that all of these agencies have become very much bought and paid for. The press is bought and paid for. Law enforcement is bought and paid for. Politicians are mostly bought and paid for. They follow the party line. And then the other politicians are a little bit too afraid to step outside of the proverbial narrative and just talk some hard truth because of political assassination, of attacks on credibility, of character assassination, of all of these things. But that doesn't make it any less true. For instance, I came to more prominence recently because on February 7th, I actually sent a phishing email to Alastair McGibbon, who is the security chief of Australian Cyber Command, and Director General Mike Burgess of the Australian Signals Directorate, which is basically the head of Five Eyes and monitors all of the information coming and going from Australia to the rest of the world.
That's very serious.
Yes. And so I sent this intelligence that I'd got as part of a phishing email utilising the credentials or impersonating Prime Minister Scott Morrison's National Security Advisor. And this I did. The emails will substantiate that. The facts will substantiate that. At some point, mainstream media and government institutions stopped relying on facts and started relying on feelings to direct the course of an investigation. And I will always rely on facts, and I will allow the evidence to lead the investigation, not how I feel about something. Feelings are subjective. They're flippant. They change day to day. We cannot form consensus on subjective reality. We never will, because it's interpersonal and individual to the experiencer. And that's why we require objective reality to form consensus as a collective body. And so with that perspective in place, in objective reality, we can all agree on a sunny day, the sky is blue. The grass is, if it's well watered, usually green. Okay, this is a hand in English. We can agree that it has 5 fingers. You know, I think I've made my point. But
it's all
for
basic
whatever
science,
reason,
isn't it?
Exactly. And the Bilderberg group are calling, there was a report that in the recent Bilderberg meeting, I think it was last year's, they refer to our society as the post-truth society. So there's been a deliberate manipulation by the mainstream media to saturate the population, particularly the Five Eyes in government. There's no longer much logic left in government. There's just a bunch of feelings running around with a bunch of opinions, trying to form some type of consensus.
And it's a very peculiar situation. You have a member of the public bringing evidence forward that's of interest to the public, and then it just gets dismissed and shut down because if it just gets
dismissed. Exactly. Now, if there was a guy who I'm friends with, and he's in a wheelchair, and he was hauled away to a maximum security prison in a wheelchair for an ounce of marijuana. I accept that under the current regime, the herb cannabis is illegal. I accept that. And I also accept that we do need law and order in society, and that there's sensible laws that are in place. And in some cases, there's arguments for the medical use of cannabis. That's not to say he didn't break the law. But I'm sorry, pulling a man in a wheelchair into a maximum security prison and leaving him in a corner without attendance on the way to the security prison for several weeks in one of the police stations.
It's a complete injustice.
Is a complete injustice. So if you're going to treat drug law that seriously on just a member of the public who is in a wheelchair, then you need to provide the same level of consistency across the board. And if you've got an FBI document in front of you which names a former president of the United States, I don't care how inconvenient it is for Australian and US foreign relations. I do not care, because very clearly in black and white, it says under the Criminal Code Act of 1995 that international drug trafficking is illegal, whether you're a president or a peasant.
Yeah. See, basically what it is we have Freemasons and secret society members masquerading as politicians, and they've got total immunity with all their crimes. Meanwhile, they're viewing the public as criminals, raising the terrorist threat. Meanwhile, they're the ones orchestrating everything like that behind the scenes.
Correct. Correct. And so this is where, it's almost like a psychological turning point one needs to make, because short of full-scale rioting, which we've seen on the streets of France, whilst it makes a huge political point, it doesn't work. Macron is still in power. Things are still going on as per normal. These people have armies and fighter jets and tanks. People on the street, it's too late for that type of action. Maybe back in the day with some of the revolts that happened, sure. But in 2019, that doesn't work. We have the internet now. We have the spread of information. And just to really clarify, I'm a World Peace Congress speaker in 2008. I am a peace advocate. I never advocate for violence as a means to achieve solutions. In fact, I think that's been the government's problem all this time. You know, and that's another point. The government are always quick to jump up and down in shock. Oh, how could this Christchurch shooter kill 50 people? Shock, horror. And yes, it's heinous. Don't get me wrong, it's heinous. That type of behaviour is abhorrent and should never be accepted in our society. But who is Jacinda Ardern? Who is Scott Morrison? Who is Donald Trump, for that matter, to get up and say how abhorrent it is when their jets under the coalition in Syria were dropping bombs on children just 2 years ago?
And that's all on record, isn't it?
It's all on record. There's dead kids in the street. They bombed Syria to get at ISIS. And here's the clincher. Right when they finally had ISIS penned in Raqqa and they were about to destroy all of ISIS, they cut a deal with ISIS. It's called Raqqa's Dirty Secret. It was reported in the BBC. And they then let ISIS go, fully armed, thousands of them, in a 7-kilometre long convoy out of Syria. Some of them escaped through Turkey and to Europe. All because of the same coalition that wants to molest you and I at the airports because we might be terrorists, that wants to put facial recognition on us because we, at any point, we could be committing any crime, and that's going to make Australians safer, isn't it, Scott Morrison?
It's very scary, isn't it? What they're doing, they're using taxpayers' money against us all. And they're using many different forms to combat innocent, hardworking people. And it seems like nobody is going to be free from this attack.
And between them both, occasionally they make enough logical points to get people agreeing, going, oh, yes, we can't be having that. Oh, no, we can't be doing this. But the whole media is all still controlled by the one entity. It's the organisers who own WWF World Wrestling, and the whole thing is a rehearsal.
That's right. And the public, I hope, will start waking up and seeing that when you have banks like Goldman Sachs that are pushing money and promoting their own agenda, and having the politicians be the ones that carry that out and push the legislation through. Puppets, mascots, shadow governments, it's all being brought to light, and it's very alarming. The public are in a state of panic.
Yep.
What direction do we go in? You know, we need more humanitarian speakers stepping forward, but even they're under attack.
That's the thing. Even the largest social media platforms we have, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, even still, the feed isn't truly organic. You know, Facebook will feed a funny cat and give it millions of views just by pressing a button to consume, you know, viewing time. Whereas any real political opinion that's against the globalist narrative, which these big companies, these big social media companies are hooked into, you know, it gets very little traction. So there's no free press. And then in terms of reporting and the media and so on and so forth, then you've already still got narratives in that and play that won't allow proper investigative journalism. In fact, investigative journalism, apart from the rare, you know, for instance, like Four Corners, so on and so forth, occasionally a current affair, though it's slipping into obscurity, is all but dead. Because of this post-truth society where the truth is abhorrent, and unless it's disinformation, which is part of the globalist trendy narrative, and it's all about trends. So if you're not part of the trend, then it's fake news. Even if the sky is blue and 1 + 1 = 2, if you're the one there saying, no, it's 2, you'll be called a bigot, a racist, a homophobe, whatever they can to discredit you, even if you are a homosexual, if you know what I mean.
And the government is supposed to be public servants looking after the best interests of the people, but they're actively working against us. Now that right there is a major red flag. We have people going down to the voting booth. They didn't vote for their freedom of speech to be stripped from them. They didn't vote for natural medicine to be denied. They didn't vote for their medical freedom to be stripped and have vaccinations forced upon them. It seems like we just don't have a say whatsoever, and our word and our voice is meaningless. That's the impression.
That's pretty much it, and it's a very scary reality to be inhabiting, which is why most people just switch off. They switch off to their work, they switch off to video games, good books, a day at the beach, a barbecue with friends, a chat on the phone with a best friend. And you know what? I don't blame you because there's really not too much that can be done, considering that I have gone all the way as hard as possible, to the point where I've had counter-terrorism police to my front door, as has been seen recently, to the point where I've been detained against my will for not even committing a crime in the AFP headquarters, with this FBI document, the USB, the smoking gun on the table in the AFP headquarters, with an assassination order signed off on by the CIA director at the time, Leon Panetta, over activity to do with these collateral accounts, and the AFP doesn't want to ask a single question because they would prefer to believe, it's more convenient to believe that this is fake news, because to them 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. They can be reading it in black and white, bold print. George Bush set up CIA cocaine trafficking, and their brain goes to mush because their worldview is George Bush was a hero of US democracy, and anyone who says different is a tinfoil hat conspiracy theory warrior.
That's very startling.
Even though the facts prove different. Exactly.
That's right. They should be following up on the inquiries,
on the evidence,
investigating the evidence that you've put forward.
Whatever happened to detectives who would follow evidence, not people's opinions, not people's little feelings, law, because you are completely standing in treason at the moment. And what's more, your Australian government sold its constitution out to the US government many, many years ago. And which all of these people who are currently serving, who are not trying to re-establish the original Constitution of Australia and claim our sovereignty back from the United States,
yeah, see, it's a
should be arrested immediately.
It's exactly. A matter of national security, and when you bring forward important information, it's up to them to look into that and not have you become a matter of focus.
Exactly. They've been making me the matter of focus, and no matter how hard they try to lock me up without committing a crime, everyone always just goes, oh, this guy's speaking perfect sense. And then it all sort of goes away. They're like, oh, well, don't, whatever you do, don't email or correspond with government again, or we'll have to lock you up again. So let me get this right. If you're driving down the highway, beautiful sunny Sunday afternoon, you've got a beautiful V8 motor car and you happen to be doing 120 because it's easy and it's safe, let's face it. But the speed limit's, say, 100 in that particular point, and you just sort of, you put your foot down as you do, and then all of a sudden you got the cops following you, woo, 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 like you're the biggest criminal in the world. They're pulling you over. You're in there with your family. You're looking like an idiot to your family because, the big bad police have come to make sure that you're being a good boy. And then they'll slap you with a fine. Let's just say it's a $200 fine and 3 points. If you don't pay, their excuse is, well, it's the law. It's the law. You've got to follow the law. It's the law, sir. It's the law. It's the law. It's the law. It's the law. Okay, so if it's so important, and they will send you at least 30 letters about it if you ignore them, maybe 50. I think anyone who's ignored any letters from the government will see just how fixated the government is on sending you letters. Yeah. A reminder for the reminder of the reminder of the reminder, and an enforcement and a threat, and I'll take your license and you'll end up in jail, and if you don't pay this, there'll be an extra $50 and then an extra $200, and they'll send you more correspondence than you can even fit in a recycling bin over the course of 12 months. Yeah. And the moment you send them more than, say, half a dozen emails to the person accountable for the section of law, for instance, the Attorney General, or in this case, ASIO. So you're writing to ASIO going, come on, look, boys and girls, what are you going to do about this? Here's the evidence. You call them on the phone and they thank you for the evidence. You have an email from the National Security Chief in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet thanking you for your contribution to Australian national security.
Yeah.
And then they will deem you a fixated threat if you correspond too much with them. And then that's how they can take you away without you even committing a crime.
That's outrageous.
Because your thinking is fixated on a particular politician or something. Now, I get if someone is mentally ill and they're clearly unstable and saying cloud cuckoo things, I realise that in society there can be a balance. And there sometimes does need to be a little bit of care around vulnerable people in society. But this is when it comes back to subjective and objective reality. Well, here I am with all the evidence, clear proof of everything that's happened, and these people can't even ask a simple question.
Yeah, and then,
or even answer a simple question.
And instead of being commended and applauded for all of your research that you're bringing forward, you end up on a terrorist watch list. They push your number off. You end up in a fusion center, and then you become a matter of investigation. It's the complete opposite of what should be happening. It's a real Twilight Zone type scenario, isn't it?
It's Twilight Zone. You really hit the nail on the head. You know, this is... And really, when you look at it, it was all through the media last February, this cyber hack. Now, on that exact same day, February 7th, I sent this email with the classified FBI document, 5 pages of narrative of how I came to that FBI document. I can call Lord David James on the phone, on his mobile phone number, to substantiate. He was given his lordship by the boss of MI6, former boss, Sir John Scarlett. So these are not cloud cuckoo people. I didn't get this information off the internet. I either generated it through my work, or I was given it by Lord James, or the corresponding information came from people who forensically conduct an investigation as a detective.
And these people, they always look after their own, don't they?
They always look after their own. That's the problem. And when I sent this information to them, a day later, they reported this massive hack. Now, let's say China did do it, or Iran, or whoever it is. We'll just say the sophisticated state actor hacked the Australian government on the exact same day I sent an elaborate phishing attack, which, with information that Lord Strathclyde, who at the time was the boss of the House of Lords. So just a bit of context, Obama comes to meet Cameron, David Cameron, President Barack Obama, have a meeting in a state visit of the president in the UK. Big state meeting. We're informed about it before it was about to go down. And Lord James is called into an urgent meeting the next day with Lord Strathclyde. And he is berated by Strathclyde, saying, why are you investigating this? This is nothing more than an Ivory Coast scam. This is the next morning after a president and prime minister meet of 2 of the most powerful countries in the world. Cut for a sec.
You're right, bro.
I'm just going to shut that for the bird sounds. And 2 of the most powerful men in the world, and they want to discuss a so-called Ivory Coast scam the next morning. So interestingly enough, when Lord James continued to press on the subject that this was very serious and he would continue to investigate it, this is the $15 trillion SWIFT linked to the CIA cocaine trafficking, because one of the men involved in setting it up was one of the men involved in the $15 trillion SWIFT.
Unbelievable.
Exactly. And long story short, Lord Strathclyde told Lord James, well, you are now interfering in the highest level of British security since World War II. Now, I have Lord James recorded, and I've put that on social media, confirming Strathclyde said that. And
crazy.
Any AFP, like, you'd assume that you'd have to be relatively intelligent to get to a senior detective level, either in our state police forces or in the AFP or in ASIO. You'd need to be pretty logical and be able to do some deep research.
It goes without saying, doesn't it?
And so if you're investigating me for doing these things, you think you'd do the basics. I mean, the basics, and look at my social media and go, oh, there's Lord James confirming that Strathclyde said that. So Mr. Priest is telling the truth in that case. You know,
it goes right to the top, doesn't it?
If anyone could believe me on face value, I just say, look at the evidence. I've got a document for that. I've got a phone call for that. I've got a conversation that will prove that. I don't make any statements that I can't veraciously back up.
And you were never given any indication that there would be resolution to any of the issues that were raised?
No.
Were you ever given any sort of insight that they were following up on anything put forward? Nothing?
No. The only time someone actually responded with a modicum of common sense was the Queensland Crime and Corruption Commission, who accepted the information and suggested I contact a lawyer. And of course, it was out of their jurisdiction because it's a federal matter. More recently, an MP has put his hand up to investigate. I'd have to get the name again because that came through a colleague of mine who's working on it. There is tiny bits of movement, but it's very much locked up. And that's why more recently I've decided, well, I've been to everyone. I've been to the Queensland Police, the AFP, ASIO, ASIS, the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security, the Australian Signals Directorate, the government. I even was former friends with Scott Morrison's family friends, best friends.
You stated that, yeah.
Yeah, he said that he'd given this information and an overview to Scott. And Scott didn't act on it, and then he tweeted out this big sob story for George Bush, the war criminal, and that upset me, and that's what made me push back on that relationship and go, hey, look, Tim Stewart, there's only one idiot at the stadium who barracks for both football teams. Okay, somewhere you've got to draw a line in the sand and you've got to show your love and loyalty for one side that you are suggesting we deal with in Australia, and you're best mates with him. You're hanging out at Kirribilli with him. And so I drew a line in the sand for Tim, and I said, well, Tim, you either get your wife to get on the phone to Scott now and get him to call me, or I'm going to go hard on you.
It's at the point where it's become personal.
It's become personal because I've put my whole life into uncovering this story. The government has punished me for doing it. The same government Scott Morrison is running, and he's siding with Scott because of Scott's celebrity and his je ne sais quoi and his title as Prime Minister. Well, as far as I see it from Gunnedah, we're all blokes, we're all Aussies. It's all equal as far as I can see. Yeah. Isn't it all supposed to be about equality? Why is the Prime Minister and his lack of evidence more important than me as an Australian man and my evidence?
It's not.
So he ignored it.
That's right. And you see, they forged their alliances with the US, and then they'll just sell out the Australian citizens without batting an eyelid. They have no conscience. And then you'll even see them doing media interviews the next day as if nothing's taking place. And you must think, you know, what's going on behind the scenes in their camp. They must be beside themselves. The damning evidence is put straight on them. They've got their hands red-handed.
They're caught red-handed, yeah. And that's why they've tried to attempt to break completely. I won't even use the term because it's not appropriate for our media here, but completely destroy my human rights and sully them and walk all over them just to drag me away from my family when I'm actually a man standing up and going, well, hey, a law's been broken. It's clearly been broken. Any basic researcher can see it's been broken, and yet you refuse to enforce law around it. When the everyday good Aussie down the street who breaks the speeding limit will literally be harassed and accosted, and if they don't pay that fine, eventually hauled before a court, and if they don't speak to the judge properly, potentially thrown in jail, all for breaking a speeding fine. And yet you can traffic the most drugs that's ever been trafficked around the world and use an Australian bank to do it. And apparently, according to the Australian government, that is completely acceptable because it was the US government and it was the CIA. And we're all, at the end of the day, this is what we have to keep in mind too, and it's what I've come to realise. A lot of these people, with no disrespect to them, they're kind of nerds. Like, yeah. I don't mean to be offensive, but most people who work behind a desk, they're a bit nerdy. They don't have much courage. And most people who get into law enforcement who have a bit more courage, they're all petrified to hold on to their jobs. So they're just following orders. Even when they know what orders they're following aren't the right ones.
Exactly. It goes back. It's like the Nuremberg trials, isn't it? That was their excuse. They're just following orders.
Just following orders. And I just have to feed my family. Yeah. I want to keep my job. And so the orders are only coming from a very small sphere of influence at the very top, controlled by the same five-eyed, global influencers that are running the banks, that are running the media, and that are running the story, doing the secret handshakes in the Masonic rituals, on a relatively, frequent basis.
Routine basis, that's right. And these globalists, as you said, they're all nerdish characters like Bill Gates. They want to basically eradicate a large percentage of the population. They've got an axe to grind through their formative years, so now they're just taking it out on everyone and using their money.
And I think this is part of the problem, going back, thanks for reminding me, when they talk about the nerds, is that these people who are then tasked to enforce law will then pass the buck. They'll pass the parcel, pass the hot potato. So the Attorney General passed it to the Foreign Minister, who at the time was Julie Bishop. ASIO passes it to ASIS. ASIS passes it back to ASIO. The AFP passes it to Queensland Police. Queensland Police pass it back to the AFP. So there's this pass the parcel and this inability to accept accountability because no one wants to be seen to be having to accept responsibility for those crimes, or at least conduct an investigation at that level, because they don't either A, want to lose their job, or B, end up dead. And that's why the counterterrorism police said to me for this long. And what we have waiting for us in our technological evolution, in research into the singularity, in research that's happening at the Stanford Research Institute on cold fusion at the moment, in research that's happening into anti-gravity and anti-gravity effects, which aren't commercial as yet, but I have seen and do speak to developers that have decreased the weight on Earth of a particular solid object by half.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Would you say we're deliberately being withheld about 60 years from where we should be at?
That sounds about right. And it's all in the vein of the fossil fuel industry. And now that there's this whole green revolution, well, I hate to disappoint Liberal and Labor supporters, but wind power, solar power, all of these things, and even electric cars, they're not green. It takes an incredible amount of resources to create a wind turbine. In fact, a lot of resources and a lot of dirty energy just to create the turbine. And that turbine can never actually replace the amount of resources that it used in the energy that it creates.
Very interesting.
It's actually, just illogical, the step we're coming from. And this is the key to evolving our understanding beyond. We see green energy and this wind and solar and all of this as an alternative to dirty energy like coal and nuclear, which it is, and it's better. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have the capacity to replace coal and nuclear. It doesn't. Otherwise, we would have done it already. And the batteries that go in our phones and laptops and cars now are dirty as. You need lithium. You need open pit lithium mines. You need cobalt. You need coltan, which actually are rare earth minerals being mined by children in the Congo.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so
and you've uncovered this as well.
Exactly, and that's why one of the reasons I'm in Congo is because A, they're beautiful people, and B, our economic strength can come from Congo. I'm not saying we don't need resources. I'm not saying we don't need mining. We do. There's 9 billion or so people here on Earth. If we just go from having all these resources and waste to no resources, we'll be in an anarchic lighting a fire in a cave in no time.
Very well said.
We need resources. We need sustainable resources, and the people who are harvesting those resources for us and mining those resources need to be financially rewarded. They deserve the house with the white picket fence.
Yeah.
The guys at the top who run these mining companies, who have 3 yachts, 10 Ferraris and 18 Lamborghinis, need to take a little bit of a pay cut. I'm sorry.
There needs to be
ethical standards. I'm not a socialist. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a capitalist. I'm not a socialist. I'm guided by pure logic, okay? We don't need more Lamborghinis. And I'm not one saying that pay cut should be enforced, because then you move into dangerous territory in communism. We're not enforcing pay cuts. That's why I've decided that no one in government, in industry at the moment is capable of a solution. I've asked, I've tried, I've campaigned. for over 10 years. In fact, since 2006, I've campaigned. In 2007, I was the first man ever to sit in Westminster. I was with the Energy Minister's policy writer and the guy who put the Sustainable Energy Bill in Parliament in Westminster, Ron Bailey. I was in Westminster briefing those guys, and I put Nikola Tesla's diaries down on the table.
That's incredible.
They had never even heard of Nikola Tesla.
You've gone right to the very top, and you've connected with all the people that are in a position of power where they can make change. And it seems like you've been even a thorn in their side trying to work for the public.
Yeah, they hate me. They hate me. And that's why I've decided, well, I'm going to go over where I'm appreciated, and that's by the Congolese. The Australians and the Congolese have no bad diplomatic blood. We've got no bad history. In fact, I'm, as far as they're concerned, we're a convict nation. And they're a convict nation. And so the convicts are getting together and going, hey, let's get ourselves out of the mess that we're in. And that's my interest in Congo. I'm not interested in, creating another empire. I'm interested in transforming this age society. That's all I'm trying to do. With enough resources for everyone. You want enough heat? Oh, heat's free. You want enough electricity? Oh, it costs nothing.
That's how it should be.
Okay, you might have to pay for instance, when you buy a DVD player, you pay for it once. And then you can watch as many DVDs as you want. Same thing. You buy a system to put in your home, you pay for it once. Okay, obviously things aren't free in this society. It costs a bit to manufacture. But at the end of the day, if you're talking about a natural resource that's more abundant than oxygen, yes, and you then think that you're like arrogant enough to charge for it, like there's enough energy in 1 cubic centimeter of space-time, so about this much, okay?
Yeah.
Between the particles, so what we know about subatomic physics is that the particles themselves only make up a fraction of a percentage of actual physical matter, the stuff we can hold on to. So I think it's 3 or 4 or 5% or something, 6% maybe. And the rest is empty space, empty. But upon further inspection, this space isn't empty at all. It's actually full of dark matter or zero-point energy. That the reason we don't feel it is because one scientist once told me it omnipresently self-cancels. So as it's expanding, it's also contracting at the exact same rate of velocity, so it cancels itself out.
That's a great explanation.
Yeah, exactly. And it's phenomenal. So there's more energy in that field than in the center of the sun's corona. There's enough energy in 1 cubic centimeter of space-time to take a cruise liner from London to London to England to the US and back.
And to suppress that information, to hold back that information from the public is very sinister. Renewable energy, sustainable sources, that's where the future should be going. They're deliberately inconveniencing mankind. Now that could alleviate a lot of financial debts from families that wouldn't have to have that electricity bill coming in from Oregon Energy. They might be able to take their family out to the movies, enjoy a cup of coffee with a friend, spend a little bit extra on outings instead of this prehistoric system that's being put in place that you're trying to help us break free from, and you're just being ignored.
And then that's how this tied in, because I came across these accounts when I was looking for high-level banking finance for this technology. And I started to see that these accounts were real, but no one was ever actually getting them to be monetized. And everyone would always say the same thing, the money's coming next week. It was like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow and it would never come. That's how they get these guys to all keep it a secret, that these collateral accounts exist. Yeah. They're promised money that never arrives, and it's always just at the tip of their fingers, and so they keep chasing it with gold fever. And I one day stopped chasing it and went, nah, something's wrong here. And then I saw Lord James on the news referencing very similar information that I'd just recently come across. And so we became close friends. And so the collateral accounts and what they're used for in terms of financing technology are very much connected to this illegal drug dealing, which is why I got involved in the drug dealing, because I realized my opposition, my competition, and my enemy, keeping this technology secret, the enemy of the people, were the very same people who are involved in setting up these accounts, creating the globalist narrative, running the banks, running the media.
You've connected
and so I realized that in order to bring this technology to light, that we would actually have to tackle the people who are preventing it. We couldn't just create a solution, because these people have trillions and trillions of dollars. They're very, very powerful. They're more powerful than whole countries. They play with countries like they play with marbles. They've got that much money.
That's it. And stock markets and all of it, isn't it?
Exactly. They've got more money than God, and they think they're God, and they treat humans like little plebs, little peasants, and we're not even peasants to them. We're just consumer collateral. And that's why there's so much cold-heartedness in this world, because to these people, we're just consumer collateral. We'll never be intelligent enough to figure it out. And so we don't deserve anything that needs to be completely eradicated from our democracies. If you want to have a society, you want to keep it secret, stay away from government. If you want to have government leaders meet at secret groups and world media leaders, film that, because you're getting money from the taxpayer, period. You know, a lot of these people think that they're amazing because they control billions of dollars. No, they won a popularity contest in an election which was bought by Freemasons one day. There's nothing too special about them.
That's what happened.
You know?
And there's very smart members of the public too that are equally as intelligent, and they've conducted experiments that prove what you're saying. Renewable energy sources, they've managed to have a crystal that can hold an infinite energy source, and as soon as they released that, they were raided, everything was taken, confiscated, they were imprisoned, where they should have been praised for doing noble work and trying to help push humanity forward. It's a very devastating reality, isn't it?
It is indeed. And that's what Ayn Rand talked about in Rourke's legal defense in the book, The Fountainhead, that all of the innovators and the people who are leading ahead are always the ones who are absolutely punished and challenged and treated like the criminals. But at the end of the day, that's life. I have now, come to the point where I don't think that government or law enforcement, even though I've been able to push this so hard and get quite considerable amount of traction, I don't think they'll ever touch it. And so the only course of action left available to me, I saw, to protect myself and family and create consensus around the movement so that it was a political movement, was to create my own political party based on these same values, and basically win a majority based on these values and policies of common sense by leading with policies like free energy, by leading with law enforcement policies like penalising and going after the high-level white-collar criminals rather than the petty criminals, like this is still, 1801 in convict Australia, because we stole a loaf of bread. Well, unfortunately, nothing's changed, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. So I have a twofold approach. One, I have very confidential work going on in Congo, not because I don't want to share it with everyone. I wish I could share it like today, right now, and I can share a little bit, but I just need to protect it from the forces that would seek to prevent it from occurring.
Of course.
But the African people and the African leaders all want to come together. I'm mandated by the King of Suku, who is a very prominent African leader. He was in the South African Parliament the other day, and he's not a politician. He's a tribal elder and a chieftain king, who is integrating African and tribal law into politics as much as possible to try and unify African countries in the spirit of peace and prosperity. And I have fantastic relationships over in Africa, and these people like me because I'm not an arrogant Freemason. They know straight away that I'm not there to try and exploit them or their people, and I'm just a humble guy from a humble background from Gunnedah, and that has done wonders. And we need to make change, and this technology I've found isn't going to be implemented in the Western world anytime soon. And because of the political leviathan that's preventing it. In fact, they're very interested in implementing it in Africa. They have every right to implement this technology in Africa. And so I think there's a lot more openness because the will is to lift their people out of poverty. I mean, these people are living in such poverty, a lot of them, that it pretty much beggars belief. And if we can invest in utilities there to improve their resources and their livelihoods, I very much see the change coming from Africa, more because the leaders are more humble, so they're more willing. And 9 times out of 10, in fact, it probably is about 9 times out of 10, these people are genuinely outside of the corruption, trying to do their best in a very bad situation to elevate the livelihoods of their people. And so in that capacity, I'm more than happy to work with African governments to seek to improve their commodity trading so that they can trade their commodities outside of the old guard and be getting more money for it that they're actually paid for in a way that their people are being paid for the work that they're doing, because these are the most commodities. It's as simple as that. That's what we need to do. And however long it takes, and I don't think this is going to happen overnight. I mean, be prepared for a long mission. But really, when you look about it, look how quickly a year goes these days. For me, this is another 10, to 15-year operation. To be realistic, like I'm not standing up and going, hey, let's get into government. I think if we get a majority, which I'm aiming for within 15 years, that would almost be a miracle. I think utilising resources, creating our own free-to-air media, all things going well, that isn't censored by the mainstream, and of course still according to Australian laws and licensing regulations, but reporting our own news. All of these things need to happen to get off the globalist system.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I've been working in so many different spheres and sectors, because no one else is doing it. It's taken, all these different roles I've had to put the hat on for to pull it all together.
That's
and I think we're getting closer. I can't say that it's guaranteed, but I can say that at least in terms of what we're doing, we have a clear plan. It's logical, it's rational, it makes sense. We have a consensus of people, some almost 250 members in the party now, so we're halfway there to registering the party. And the solutions that we offer Australia are powerful and profound and can change our children's way of life.
And it's very comforting how passionate you are about the campaign. That's the right person that we need to spearhead this forward. Someone that their heart is involved, they're invested, they've got the best interests at the public with them at every decision they make, honour and integrity. See, that's what politicians haven't got that, and you have that in spades, and that's what the public needs. Very comforting.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, I've been doing this for 10 years and haven't made a cent out of it. So, and I'm not looking to. For me, the value, money is money. I've sat at tables with millions of dollars worth of diamonds. I've been left alone at tables with millions of dollars worth of diamonds, millions and millions of dollars worth of diamonds that hadn't even been weighed yet. That's the trust I have at tables in Africa. I could have put those diamonds in my pocket and run off. Why don't I? Because to me, it's not about money. To me, money is the means to achieve a valuable objective. And that objective is a sustainable, peaceful future for my children, for our children, that they can inherit a society without war. And the only way, because America is invested so much on the permanent war economy, if it isn't manufacturing weapons, it goes bankrupt. And that's been the case since the end of World War II, which is why we've had so many wars, because national security, national economic security for America is war. And without that, they have economic problems. So that's where we need to change the engine of that entire industry into peaceful space innovation and space exploration. The reason why that hasn't happened, of course, is because it means that those very wealthy families won't be as wealthy ever again, because they won't have monopolies over the energy industry, the fossil fuel industry.
Very well said.
the precious metal industry.
See, that's right. It all ties into Operation Fast and Furious, isn't it? They ship in the drugs, they ship the guns in, and what they do is they spread it all throughout low-income neighbourhoods to weaken people that are already at their lowest point. And we've uncovered that. You see, the gun violence, the drugs that are on the rise, it's because the government is behind it. And it all goes back to the pharmaceutical industries as well. They run that, and they just want to weaken people, divide and conquer, and hopefully we can get some results and even slow them down with that agenda.
Well, absolutely. I think the events of February 7th put them on notice, and as much as nothing objective and concrete in terms of the mainstream deliverables has come from that, I'm very aware of the difficulties that created in some very secret compartments of the Australian government. They're on notice, and they know we're not going to go away, and I'm not going to stop.
Neither will I. And
we're not going to stop.
That's right. Well, look, full praise from everyone here at We Are Change. The work you're doing is going to ultimately save mankind if you're successful, and we'll put all the information in the description so you can be contacted. Everything will be made available there. Continued success.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm only as strong as the man or woman next to me, and we need everyone's support to get together to push sensible and rational policies according to the evidence and the rule of law in Australia. So thank you so much for your time, mate, and I'm honoured to be able to share this message. It's got nothing to do with me and everything about the people that have come before me to educate me to be able to share this message with you today. So thank you.
Excellent job. Thank you. Well, we'll wrap the show up there, folks. All links to Eliahi Priest and the Our Remembrance Party will be in the description. Be sure to like, share and subscribe, and stay tuned to the We Are Change talk show, where we expose corruption, one episode at a time. Are you tired of hearing lies and fake news on mainstream media? Do you find it insulting to your intelligence? Well, look no further. The We Are Change talk show is here. President Trump has launched airstrikes on Syria. A lot of his prominent conservative supporters have turned against him after this action. Have you suffered human rights violations or been a victim of corruption? The We Are Change talk show would like to hear about it. Phone the number on your screen today.
Who the hell's going to listen to a little guy? You guys are, thanks.
Yes, it's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And what I hope is they don't put a mother and a child in the house, because that child will die. And no one seems to believe me.
Once again, much love to everybody at We Are Change, and I look forward to seeing you guys at more events in the future and working more closely with you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for the call, my friend, and all the best of luck moving into the future.
Much appreciated.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. You know, the legendary Jeff.
Without the instrument of We Are Change, we will not have a future. We will not have a country or world to leave to our children. We won't have children able to function in it. So be a part of it. Join it.
We Are Change Melbourne gives those who mainstream media have ignored a voice, exposing corruption, injustice, human rights issues, and much more. We Are Change Melbourne is the voice of the people.
Yeah, this is Jeff. Met Jeff for the first time I'd met Jeff. He too is a lovely chap, and he has a YouTube channel called We Are Change Melbourne. So if any of these topics pique your interest, pop over to We Are Change Melbourne and say good day to Jeff. You've seen that video that's just going past the interview, Enough is Enough. Watch that one.
Phone the number on your screen and be connected with the We Are Change talk show.